for those of you joining us here, we'll be starting in about 5 minutes. So get settled in, and we'll resume shortly.
Whoa.
Oh, I see what you mean.
That's like lag.
Yeah. All three of our screens are in different places.
Oh, you can drag it around.
I meant like in terms of time.
Oh,
Because we all had it the same one.
Well, no, literally, I think. I'm gonna subscribe to my channel. Yeah. I'm adding more.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Put the A's right now, too. Alright, another Z right here. Cool. It's so cool. The iPad can't do 360, so it shows like parallel.
Wait, what is it? Oh, it shows the
Just
It shouldn't be the iPad, it should be yours.
Yeah, but like, you know how
That's interesting.
maybe it's because I'm on Safari, not the app.
Maybe. I am on Chrome.
Oh yeah, he is on a phone, not a viewer.
I'm turning this around. Put it on my phone.
Alright, so I guess at 12, or at 1, we'll just kind of go with it.
Well, that's cool how you see the logo on the bottom.
What does it tell us? How many people are in the
Oh,
chat
yeah.
right now, or watching this room?
Hold on.
Just below on the
We have
left.
9.
Just below
It's
the
about to
yellow.
be
Should we start off by saying something about you can click and drag your screen on?
Sure.
I'm going to move around and move some
Yes.
of it.
It's really cool. The
Accident.
easier way to move. That
I
makes
know,
sense,
yeah,
because
you
that
could
you
go
like
like
move it around by.
Yeah, because you could put in those box ones, you know? Like,
Yeah.
that's what the video's for.
And be there.
Ooh.
It's weird, it works on my phone with 3D.
Yeah, because ours are newer than the iPad. That's like
Wow,
the
these iPads are
first gen iPad. Hold on, here. It won't work, will it? Does it have to be like a fisheye with like 101?
yeah. I'll show you how to do it though. You
I don't think it'll, because when we use these, there's been 2 circuits before, right? Or no?
Yeah. Like that.
Ah.
There we go.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. iPhone's too big. Oh no way though.
Is it like right here?
I see. Oh, you're helping me right now. That looks pretty cool. See? You can see this. My phone's too big, so I'm gonna throw it, but
Oh, wait, that's so cool.
Weird. This is trippy.
So it feels like I'm actually there. The immersion's real. Oh wait, I am.
Is this the organ on you?
Alright, so we'll give it about another minute or so, and then we'll get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Landon Phillips,
I'm Anna Speth.
and we're here to talk today about the Genesis Lab, Pepperdine's makerspace here on campus.
So makerspaces are a phenomenon that's happening across libraries and schools and even within communities that give people a place to go and make tangible things in this more digital world. And especially within academia, being able to walk away with a thing that you made that you can keep is fairly rare these days. So we wanted to give kids a place where they can have that experience.
Absolutely. And Pepperdine's makerspace, specifically what makes it unique to Pepperdine, our mission statement centers around providing a space where students can work together, learn together, and create together. The first part, working together, we wanted to provide a space to encourage interdisciplinary contact and collaboration. We want the art majors in here just as much as the marketing majors, just as much as the engineers, just as much as the pre-med. Everybody is welcome. That's why it's kind of in a neutral territory here in the library. Secondly, a space to learn together. Every month or so we have around a workshop or two that we aim at teaching just kind of a general skill set as kind of an introductory mini class. So let's say you're interested in computer programming, but you can't really devote a full semester's class to it before you know if you like it or not. You could come to one of our workshops, try it out for around 2 hours or so, and if you get the cute little robot to navigate the maze, you may realize, hey, you know, I'm pretty good at this computer science stuff. That might be worth working into my schedule next semester. And then finally, a place to create together. As Anna said, there's something just intrinsically rewarding about creating something, either tangible with your hands, like the 3D printers, or even virtual with some of the software or 360 cameras that we have for the students to create content in virtual reality for. But speaking to that, I want to transition here. If you could follow us along, we're going to start talking about the 3D printing aspect here at the lab.
A quick note though, for those of our viewers who this is their first 360 recording experience, if you click anywhere on the actual video within YouTube and hold, you can drag it around and see the entire room. So if we aren't in screen, you could drag it around to see us, or if you want to see other things going on in the room, you can do that as well.
Absolutely. Let's go check out the printers. So here we have what we have affectionately titled our petting zoo. Essentially, it's where we have a few display pieces of the 3D prints so that passersby, our lovely glass wall here, can see them, hopefully be intrigued, and come in and check out what kind of things we can offer here. 3D printing in general has a lot of really interesting applications. As a general method of design, it's starting to spread out into multiple disciplines that even just a few short years ago wouldn't even fathom incorporating. So for example, in kitchens, it's starting to show itself because chefs have realized that you can modify these 3D printers to print in chocolate instead of plastic. So now some high-end restaurants are actually hiring chefs with 3D modeling experience so that they can design a dessert on the computer before printing it out and plating it in a restaurant. They also scale both at the micro level and the macro level. For instance, high-end fancy printers can work with very small components, even down to like the cellular or molecular level. So let's say you have a team of chemical engineers or biologists. You can actually work with adding individual enzymes and proteins together to, say, work on a potential medical cure that you could then test in your lab. It also scales up to work at a much larger level. So instead of just using plastic or chocolate or things like that, people have actually rigged up cranes and cement mixers to work in tandem with very similar software to print entire structures. South by Southwest, just a few years back, had a challenge to design a house or temporary structure that could be built in under 24 hours and less than $4,000 with this it's essentially a large 3D printer, and they had several contestants that were successful. Now, of course, it's good to manage realistic expectations. It's not going to put in the drywall and the electrical for you, but say you have, you know, a terrible earthquake or storm that comes in, and the potential for aftershocks or continuing gale force winds means that a temporary tent situation is not going to work. Well, if you have 10,000 people suddenly become homeless overnight, you need a quick solution. something like this could be brought in with a minimal team. You don't need a full workforce of skilled laborers, but these machines can be working 24 hours a day, printing layer by layer of this concrete to give you temporary housing for those people. And then all of a sudden, overnight, you've used 3D printing to solve a refugee crisis. So again, it's kind of impossible for us to predict exactly where and how this technology is going to be used, only that we see as a trend, it's starting to crop up in lots of different applications, which is really exciting and why we want to get this in the hands of our students. Now, speaking of our students, we've talked about kind of the big scale stuff, but Anna, how has this technology been used specifically here at Pepperdine?
Yeah, so we've been lucky enough to have quite a few faculty partnerships, even though we've only been around about a year. We've had a lot of classes come through and do various projects with the 3D printing. Whenever we have students in here, we always get them started on Tinkercad. That's a 3D modeling software. It's all web-based, so you don't have to download it. It's free to use. You can create your own account. That's Tinkercad if you want to Google it yourself and get started. I like to say that if you can use Facebook and you can use Legos, then you can use Tinkercad. It's really, really basic. The tutorial is about 5 to 10 minutes. So it's really something that no matter where a student is coming from, they'll be able to use it very quickly and create something completely from scratch. So we've had a lot of different disciplines in. We've had art classes in, which I think is a fairly obvious use of 3D printing. It really is a new medium, the whole digital modeling thing that can go into VR or 3D printing for the art world. So not only are the kids able to create an art project, which we're assuming they want to do as art students, they get to use a new piece of hardware, the 3D printer, which they are likely to run into if they continue in the art world or in other fields. And they also get to try their hand at 3D modeling for the first time, which is something else that, especially if you want to go into video game design or special effects or animation these days, 3D modeling is something you're going to need to be able to wrap your head around as an artist. We've also had some harder science classes come in here, especially ones that are dealing with the molecular level. We've had students come in and model their own atoms. I believe this is a H2O atom. I haven't taken science for a long time, don't judge me here. But it's very easy to make and not only obviously blows something up that the kids can't see in real life, it gives them a bit more of the understanding of how these things relate to each other in 3 dimensions than they can get from a textbook page, and gives them another way to engage with the material that isn't reading something and regurgitating it back. We've also had molecular or cellular level biology classes come in. So this is a split cell that someone designed on Tinkercad. You can see it's really just the combination of a lot of simple shapes. We've got a big circle and little circles, little ovals. You might not be able to see this. I realize it's very grainy, but take my word for it. And this is something you can create in Tinkercad in 10 minutes probably if you've never used it before, maybe 3 if you have. But thinking through the process of the design of it is something that would give the kids a different experience with cells and give kids that have a bit more of a tactile sense of learning route to go about that. We've also had something similar happen with the nutrition class where each student was assigned, they're actually in pairs, and they were assigned an organ in the digestive tract, required to come print it at certain size specifications. And then once everyone had their prints, they took them back and in class reunited it into the whole GI tract. So they're able to see the GI tract in 3-dimensional space and also understand how all these different organs actually connected and interacted with each other. In a bit of a different direction, we have also had some of the teacher ed classes come in here. Once again, you probably can't see this, but it is a little nameplate. It says Miss Tara. And when we have the teacher ed classes come in, we usually have them do this because they get a nice takeaway that is something that's actually useful. But more importantly, 3D printers are popping up in the middle school, high school level, obviously at the university level. So for these kids that want to go out and become educators, they're going to run into this in the field, and having a base understanding of the 3D modeling software, which is applicable across any different hardware type printers. And also just the basics of how printing works and some ideas for educational projects that they can do. That's something we really like to give them. And then one more project I wanted to touch on that wasn't actually a faculty-led project or class project at all. It's something one of our student workers is doing. He came back from his summer internship with some brain scans. which he then managed to jimmy into a 3D model. It's called a STL file type, so he made that. And then he sliced it into a bunch of thin pieces, because printing the whole thing at once would have taken about 100 hours. These printers aren't that fast. That's why we do smaller projects that you can't see on this grainy footage, is because they take less time. But he's doing a full-size brain, slice by slice, and then he's going to do a cast of it, so he will have a full human scale model of someone, I don't know whose, brain. So that's obviously something that would be hard to replicate in a class because it is very involved, but speaks towards the more cutting-edge research that we can do with students or faculty on a personal research level.
Absolutely. And so the next main technology, besides the 3D printers we have here, is the virtual reality. So if you can follow us here, we're going to transition to the other side of the room now and talk a little bit about that. So virtual reality, just like the 3D printers, again, is a technology that has been around technically for even a few decades at this point, but it's only recently that we've reached this tipping point where it's affordable enough and technically convincing enough that it can really appeal to kind of mainstream audiences. I want to talk a little bit about some of the potential research applications we have and how the technology is being used here at Pepperdine. So the two main types of VR that we have here in the lab, the high performer engines, are the HTC Vive, which you can see being demoed here behind us, and the Oculus Rift. Now the Oculus was actually bought by Facebook, and there's kind of a now infamous story circulating about how Mark Zuckerberg was convinced. He actually tried a demo of a piece of software we actually have here in the lab, so if you want to recreate his experience, feel free to come by. It's called Plank Not Included, and in it you take an actual physical real-world plank, very similar to this one, and you lay it on the ground, and you have people just start off by walking the plank, so to speak. And it's plenty wide, it's not that hard, so it's not very scary. It's very easy, people kind of laugh it off. And then you put on the headset, and that same plank is picked up by the software to correspond to a digital version of the plank. And then you have people walk across the same plank, but now it's a simulated height of, say, 6 feet off the ground. And so people kind of go a little bit slower, but they make it across. And as the levels progress, you go higher and higher. And so eventually you're walking across the same plank at the skyscraper level, and people are, full on shaking, or they'll just sit down and refuse to play anymore, or they feel this very genuine fear response, even though they know just moments ago that it's a completely safe and easy thing to do. So what's fascinating from a research standpoint is figuring out how this new technology, how easy it is for us to trick our senses into believing that we're somewhere we're not, or that we're in danger when we're not. So for academic applications, the amount of things you could tie into this are limitless. The psychology division, GCEP, has expressed interest in using this for things like exposure therapy or immersion therapy, where say you have a fear of flying. You could get into a virtual kind of pre-boarding flight simulator, as it were, feel like you're actually getting on board the plane. You can feel that kind of normal negative emotion starting to manifest again, but all the while you have this kind of safety switch where you can just take off the headset and you're instantly back to being safe again. So it's a great way to kind of ramp up certain patients as they're dealing with these fears and phobias in a very safe environment. There's also really unique applications. There's a great one here where they had a study where people came in and sat down and said, okay, we'll get the test started in a minute, put on your VR goggles and enjoy just some cookies as a snack before we get started. And little did they know that participants were actually being gauged on how many cookies they ate on their own will. So they ate these little cookies and came back in the next day, same thing, sit down, enjoy some cookies, we'll get started in a moment. This time, though, on the second day, they digitally enlarged the version of the cookie, which again they had to see because they had the VR headset on and couldn't actually see the cookie. They visually enlarged the digital cookie 25%, and on average, each participant ate around 10 to 15% less cookies, which means that not only can your sense of vision be tricked into seeing something you know isn't there, or feeling like you're somewhere you're not, you can also trick even your basic sense of hunger into thinking that you are more full despite not having actually eaten as much as you thought you did. So again, we're really excited about the potential for groundbreaking research there, how that could pertain to different disciplines we haven't mentioned yet. But we, again, have some great examples here at Pepperdine. Anna, could you walk us through some of those?
Absolutely. So I really love VR. I think it is one of the most interdisciplinary pieces of tech we have in the lab. I started using VR through a similar space when I was an undergrad, and I was a history major. So I'm not a computer scientist, I'm not an engineer, I'm very much humanities, and there is still so much for me to do with these machines. But one of the first examples I want to talk about that we've had happen here at Pepperdine is not humanities, it's actually back to the sciences again. We have a couple applications that are really good for learning about the human body. So if you can see right here, once again, I don't know how fuzzy it is, but we have one of our student workers here in an application called Organon, and it more or less mimics a cadaver lab. You can choose different systems. He's in the skeletal system right now. You can look at the muscular system, digestive system, cardiovascular system. You can isolate it and just look at those, or look at all the different systems together. And you also have the ability to animate the body, which is an added value from cadaver labs. It's not something they usually do. And also when you click on different, in this case, bones, and you look to your side, you have an entire screen that gives you a good, long paragraph with the details about that piece that you've picked up. So you can take it out, put it back together again. In general, really good for learning about anatomy. And we've had some professors assign this as homework for their classes before. We also have other applications that I like to call magic school bus style when it comes to learning about the human body. So they sink you down to a microscopic level, and you travel through the blood vessels, or you're in the brain looking at the neurons firing. We have one where you're next to a heart, which is about a foot taller than you are, that's pumping. You can choose to look at a healthy one or an unhealthy one. So all of these have been used in classes before. We also, once again, have a lot of art classes in here to use the VR. Virtual reality, back to that 3D modeling, is really exciting because it's just a completely new medium for art. And when you're in the headsets and view these things, it's just a completely different experience, and you can have, huge landscapes that you teleport around, or these really detailed, tiny little 3D models. And it's all the Wild West right now. There's no, nothing to go off of, basically. You get to create from nothing, which can be scary, but also really exciting to have that opportunity. So we have applications on both of these fully immersive rigs right here that we like to refer to as Paint for VR, but we also hate to refer to as Paint for VR because they're so much cooler. So this one has one named Quill. We've had students use that for animation projects before. You can create little 3D models and animate them all when you're standing there in the headset. On this one over here, the Vive, we have an application called Tilt Brush. It's made by Google, which means it plays well with Google Drive, which is kind of fun, since that's our system at Pepperdine. We've also had some really cool full landscapes. You can import a mannequin and design dresses or different fashion models on there. And one thing we got really excited about, we actually had a physics student come in one day, and he'd just taken an exam, and he couldn't figure out one of the questions, and it was just really bothering him. So he decided, all on his own, we did not think of this, to get in the headset and open up this art application and use it as a 360-degree whiteboard. And he could color code his work, and very beautiful mind style was able to figure out this problem that he couldn't figure out using pencil and paper. So not only is that really cool on its own as a space for students to work, if you are their teacher coming in to grade this work, when you reload it, it reloads in the same order that it was drawn. So you can see their thought processes, and when they remembered what, and what they were writing off to the side, and when they wrote that, and all these things. And really gain an understanding of how they are understanding the material. And you can either come in and view that in the headset, or all of these things you can record as a video and export as an MP3 and watch on any computer. You can also take screenshots and use that for grading, so don't feel like you have to spend hours in here grading assignments. There are definitely other avenues for that. The classic example of VR in the classroom is generally field trips, impossible field trips. So we have all of Google Earth, where you can fly around the Earth like an airplane. You can drop down into Street View. You can go around all these beautiful cities anywhere in the world. We also have Mars. You can go to Mars in virtual reality. You can go to ancient Jerusalem, ancient Rome. You can go to, there are some applications built for specific great authors or artists where they've redone their apartment or studios, so you can go explore those and explore kind of the blocks around where they lived and gain a deeper understanding of the inspiration that these people had in their day-to-day lives. They're doing one for Walt Disney right now. They're doing his office, so that will be available soon. But I also wanted to mention briefly, we've talked a lot about the things available on these rigs. We also have these things called Google Cardboards. These, with a handy-dandy smartphone, you can slot your phone in right here, close it up, and enjoy your lovely immersion. It's not going to be the same. It's very, very low depth in comparison, but we have just under 30 of these. So if you have more than 2 students who you would like to show VR to, these are a good option. And these have, there's a lot of VR available on YouTube. Just search hashtag 360video. Everything that comes up will be compatible with these. There are also what I like to call the Netflix for VR, or ones that are trying to be such. Those applications are available on our rigs as well as on phones. So you can find documentaries or TV shows or musical experiences all on those that can go on pretty much any platform these days.
Absolutely. All right, so we want to kind of conclude today with kind of some of the odds and ends, miscellaneous technologies that we have here in the lab. So we'll head back over this way here and wrap up here shortly. So the goal of this space, like any innovative one, is to constantly stay ahead of the curve and on the edge of whatever's happening next. In the spirit of that, we hope to aim to introduce a new technology basically every semester here. So though we launched with the 3D printers and the virtual reality, in the past year we've also added soldering stations for people interested in learning some basic electrical engineering. We have added, some basic robotics work, some intro to programming, and also our latest major technical addition was a vinyl cutter we have on the far side of the room that allows our students to create their own custom laptop decals, vinyl stickers, even heat-activated t-shirt designs as well. So we're kind of branching into the kind of graphic design department that way. Again, giving students the ability to, instead of ordering something off Amazon, make it their own, learn how the manufacturing process works, and feel a sense of pride in making something that they're proud to display that they had a hand in making.
And one thing I wanted to mention before we go into a Q&A, also if you have any questions, feel free to post them in our comments now and we'll get to them very shortly, but was just to cover the kind of projects that we've had success with in the past. As I mentioned briefly, we've only been open a year, so we're always really excited to try new things. That's also just something we try to do in the space. So if you have any other ideas, feel free to reach out to us with them. But things that have worked well so far are kind of 3 different types of classroom experiences. There is what I like to call the show and tell, which is where you would bring your class here for probably minimum 30 minutes up to an entire class period, and we just kind of show them an overview of all the tech in the lab, teach them the basics of Tinkercad if they're interested, get them in the VR, and we will tailor that to whatever the class is, whatever that subject area is. But it's really just a cursory, this is what is happening in this field with emerging technology. The next step up from that is the homework assignment, and that typically works by the faculty member coming in and sitting down with Landon and I and coming up with some sort of assignment that the kids can do completely outside of class. So they will then email us at our Genesis Lab account and schedule time to come in. We'll teach them Tinkercad then and help them print something. That's how we did the GI track for the nutrition class. Or they'll spend 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever you want, in a certain VR application. We'll walk them through that. We can sign something saying that we saw them do that, or they can draw and take a screenshot and send it to you to prove they did that. So that's worked very well in the past as well. And the final, I'm all in with the Genesis Lab for this class, is the long format project. And that's been more of our art project so far. And that involves usually the class coming in for an intro to the technology that's more of a how do I use this to create? And then having a major project, a midterm or a final, be created using a piece of technology in the lab. And that usually involves them, once again, emailing us and booking off time to come work with the VR rigs or get more training on Tinkercad. But those are generally our most fruitful and have the best creations come out of them, but is a big commitment. But we really love all of these project styles. We're happy to work with you with whatever works for your class, or like I said, if you have any other ideas, please do let us know, because we're, always looking for exciting new ways to expose kids to this technology.
Absolutely. The beauty of this space is that none of us are as smart as all of us. So even if we haven't listed a specific example that pertains to your area of interest or your discipline, many, many times our case studies that we've referred to today weren't necessarily our ideas. They came from professors who came in and say, hey, I'm really interested in this, but I have no idea, A, how any of this works, and B, if it even relates to my, how can this help me teach humanities? And then we'll sit down with them and brainstorm and be like, all right, let's check this out. How do you want to integrate this potentially into your classroom? What kind of level of engagement are you looking for? What kind of time commitment are you looking for? And we're very open to what your area of expertise is, what your teaching style is, and working to accommodate that so that this really helps support that, rather than us kind of wagging our finger and be, oh, you better teach this way or else, you're going to be left in the past. It's not really how we do things here. We're very open to different ideas, partnerships. So if you say you have an idea for, hey, I've heard there was like a courtroom simulator. Could that work for some of my law classes? Absolutely. We can look into that. We can research it. If it's a type of application, a lot of times we can purchase it for you, test it out, and then we can find a way to bring that partnership to life and further engage your students in your classrooms. So what we'll do now as we conclude this session is leave the stream open for a bit longer. We can answer any questions you may have in the chat. But whether you're tuning in live or at a later date, thank you very much for joining us today. You're always welcome to come by the lab at any time. Typically we're open 5 days a week, roughly from 10 to 4, and then 12 to 4 on Wednesdays. We'd love to have you reach out to us or send us an email at genesis.lab@pepperdine.edu. Thank you very much.